So today, after an ice plunge, I felt it's actually written on my chest. I felt a lot of gratitude, and I don't know if you ice plunge or not. I fell off the wagon, and this week I'm trying to really integrate it into my life again. And I'm so grateful I have a neighbor, and we make each other accountable. But I did the plunge. I did a sauna. Did the plunge. 3 minutes. And by the way, you don't have to jump into a 30 degrees water, right? You could jump into 50. It doesn't have to be like your balls don't have to go up into your mouth because the water's so cold. It could just be like you're at a spa, right? Cold enough where you're gonna see an effect, but you don't have to scream every time you plunge, right? So anyway, got out of the plunge, and every time I get out of the plunge, they say that 5 minutes after you do an ice plunge, it's impossible to not be happy. And I find this to be true, and I think it's dopamine and chemicals and all of this happening, but especially if you do it outdoors, where after the plunge, you're also getting some vitamin D and there's sun on your face. It's an amazing feeling. And I was feeling a lot of gratitude, just grass fed gratitude, if that makes sense. Pure, right? And I thought to myself, I want to take my mom out to dinner. I only see my mom once a week, and she doesn't have much of a life. And look, who am I to judge what her life should look like? But she stays in her house and watches Korean TV all day, and she does her walk. Um, she used to go to the gym and like play around with machines. She doesn't have any friends. She doesn't really want any friends. I see her once a week when she comes to our house to watch Logan for a couple hours, so we could go to the gym. That's it. And so I want to make more of an effort. So I said, I'm going to take her to dinner. I call her. I said, listen, hey, I want to take you out to a nice dinner tonight, and let's go get some steak. For Koreans, I mean, not all Koreans, but my Korean family, I think growing up, especially old school Korean, meat was for the rich. So they grew up on rice and kimchi. So steak is like, for it's a treat. And so I said, okay, let's go to this place. It's a little fancy. I keep hearing about it. It's the kind of place where they have, you buy $100 steak and then everything's a la carte, right? But it's my mom. Let's go. She says, and I could tell that she actually kind of wanted to go because she would turn. If I ask her to do anything where it pulls her out of the house, it's instant no. It's instant like all these excuses, right? Waste of money, like, oh, I don't blah blah. And today she kind of her ears kind of perked up and there was a beat, and so I could tell, oh, she actually wants to get the fuck out of the house. Great. And she says, okay, but let's if we go out, let's go to Sizzler. I was like, oh, mom, you got to pull yourself out of the '80s. And I have this whole theory about Sizzler. I actually have witnessed Sizzler because as a kid, I remember how magical Sizzler was. And I think for my parents, because they came from, a village and making their own shoes and poverty, I think the imprint that Sizzler left on them when they first came to America in the '80s was it was mind blowing to have an all you can eat buffet. Bananas are imported in Korea, so they're expensive. And here at the salad bar, you could eat as many fucking bananas as you want, and you get steak, and you get unlimited shrimp. Like, I understand why Koreans were obsessed with Sizzler in the '80s. Um, but I was telling my mom, it Sizzler isn't as good anymore. I mean, all the restaurants that were great in the '80s are not as good anymore. Pizza Hut is now fast food. It wasn't Pizza Hut used to be a restaurant where you sat and there was servers and deep dish. Anyway, so I said, no, we're gonna go to this new place and we're having dinner. Um, and one thing about my mom and I is because she doesn't speak English well and I don't speak Korean well. Um, I've known this woman for 51 years, and I'm telling you, I don't really know her that well. It's kind of sad. And so I always get like random shit that she says that I'm like, I had no idea. And so today she was telling me about when she first came to America, and she was telling me everything. And she said when we first came here, it's funny. So when we first came to America, we landed in Columbus, Georgia, in like '78. Obviously, tons of racism, and she got a job at it was called Magic Market, which is equivalent to a 7-Eleven. And she got a job because my dad knew someone, and the supervisor would come, and she knew when he would come, and every time he came, she would like go outside and just like wash the windows and just go above and beyond to make sure that he knew that she was this amazing employee. And because of this trickery, he gave my mom and dad their own store to manage. And so it was 24 hours. So my mom and dad worked from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. They split the shift, $2.70 an hour, and then they would hire someone to work graveyard. And so when they first came to America, this is what they did. And I said, "Where were we? You had two sons." And she said, "Oh, you guys were in Korea." I was like, "What the fuck?" I had no idea. So you came to America and you left your two kids. And what's really interesting about this and why I was blown away was because I was about my daughter's age. I was a little bit younger. I was around 3. And I was thinking to myself, if I went to another country with my partner and we left Logan with our parents or family for a year, like would we be able to do that? Would we feel guilt? And then I was thinking like, kids at that age grow so fast that a year, I mean, you're missing a year of someone's life, a kid's life. What is that thing I saw recently where I think it was you spend, I think from up to age 12, the amount of time you're spending with your kid is going to be like 80% of that kid's life or something crazy, which makes sense because kids, when they become adults, like me, not spending time with my mom, you don't really see them, right? Only on the holidays and stuff. And so these younger years are precious, and a year is a long time. And I was thinking, wow. And then I was thinking, they didn't do that because they were, abusive or anything. It was just survival. It was their ticket into America. They had to leave their kids behind for a year, so they would come. So the plan was to come here, work at this 7-Eleven, 14, 16-hour shifts, save some money, get a feel of the land. Although Columbus, Georgia, in '79, I don't know what that was like. Um, by the way, I remember one of my first memories was like I think I was 4. I don't remember I don't remember what happened scenic wise, but I remember the feeling in my body. I was about my daughter's age of being at a restaurant and the feeling of not being wanted, the feeling of people staring, the feeling that we don't belong here. It's crazy. That's one of my first memories of America. And I know it was when we were in Columbus, Georgia. But anyway, so they did that, and then they came back to Korea to get their kids. My dad joined the U.S. military for those benefits. We came back to Georgia, and I think for 2 years they worked at the Magic Market, aka 7-Eleven. And I said, "Where were we?" And so they put us in daycare, and I was like, "You guys were making $2.75 an hour after daycare. Like, how did you live?" But of course, everything was cheaper then. Um, and then they saved up money, and we drove. And I remember this: we drove in this little VW Volkswagen from Columbus to California. And I said, "Why Cali?" And she said tonight, she said, we had a friend who said that California is where the city is, and there's lots of sunshine. and the weather's really nice. I swear this is what she said. And so we just decided to come to California based on that. I think also there was tons of racism and they felt uncomfortable and unwanted. But anyway, so we end up in Roland Heights. And if you live in LA, Roland Heights currently I think is like all Asian. But when we moved there in the 80s, we were the only Asian family for blocks. It was all Caucasian and Hispanic. And we rented a little bit and then we bought our first house. Um, and I said, "How much was that house?" And she said it was double of what houses were in Columbus, Georgia. In Columbus, Georgia, a house was $40,000. They saved their ass off. They worked their ass off and saved, and they bought an $80,000 house in Roland Heights. This is the house I grew up in. And then my dad got a job at GTE. GTE is like a telephone company. And my mom bought a little hamburger shack. It's in Burbank. It's still there. It's now called like Yaki or something. It's Yaki. It's on the corner of Alameda. It's right by the Burbank Studios. Anyway, it's the size of like a closet. It's tiny. Um, she bought that from another Korean person for $30,000, and it was called AMO, and it was American, Mexican, and Oriental foods. And by this time, I was in my teens, like 13, 20. And I remember I would go to work with my mom, and I would skate all day. I would just skate, and my mom would be making egg rolls and shit. She would have a little fan on her face, and they did well there. They because they sold like burritos, egg rolls, uh, and burgers and tacos. It was like I think it was like ahead of its time because this was late 80s, I think, and there was nothing like there was no like fusion. You couldn't buy kimchi at Trader Joe's. Korean food still at the time was like gross. Culture was not accepted, right? And so like American food was American food, Korean food. There was no mixing. And so my mom's little burger stand, AMO, uh, she had got the idea of just mixing shit. So you could actually go there and buy egg rolls and burgers and tacos and all sorts of stuff. And so we had a whole lunch crew from the Burbank studios, all the execs that would come. So she did okay. And I remember like I remember we sold like $350 a day, and that was amazing. That was like we won the lottery. That was like, and growing up in a Korean house where there was a lot of weight on business, and the mood of the house, and if people were happy, was contingent on the sales of that day, right? And so we've always had little businesses, and I get why it was like this, but I also think it was damaging, because I think it has impacted me, as an adult, the fear of um, business not being good, and so I remember my dad, he would be on cloud nine, and my dad was he was very much like me. My brother's like my mom in that he was inappropriate. He was he was just loud, and when he was happy, he was so fun to be around. And then when he was sad or mad, he would hijack space, right? And I feel like I'm like him. When I'm happy, I'm happy. And when I'm mad, I can um, impact the people around me, right? I could be a miserable fuck, and so that was based on what we sold. And if we did well, if we sold a lot of egg rolls, my dad was happy. And if we didn't sell a lot of egg rolls, my dad was like, "How are we going to live?" kind of thing. And I think it was damaging. I think back at my childhood, and I feel like, oh, well, I've never been abused. Um, but man, I think that fucks with you as a kid, and because they were just so obsessed with business, because of course they had to be, they were always gone, and this was the '80s, so my my dad never played with me. I feel like my mom. I feel like I was close to my mom because even though she never played with me, I went to work with her, and she would always give me money to go like buy stickers at the skateboard store. Um, I remember I had a memory today because I found out that breakdancing is officially a sport in the Olympics, and I was a breakdancing kid in the '80s. And I remember when I was like 11, I entered the Chuck E. Cheese breakdancing competition. All white, white, Hispanic, black, no Asians, no zero Asians at the Chuck E. Cheese breakdancing competition. And I think I got a second or third place. But I remember on stage, me doing my little windmills and standing up, or I was like popping, whatever. And I saw my mom and my aunt, and I remember what that meant for me. I was, and it must have been the weekend because they would never take off work, right? And so my aunt and my mom came to watch me compete. And I think like for like I was gonna say for white people, but I guess anyone, especially this generation, we we're like front row in all our kids' events, right? Whether it's the soccer game or the gymnastics or whatever. But I don't think it was like that in the '80s, and at least um, for me, that's the only thing my parents ever attended. My dad wasn't there; it was just my mom. But it was the only thing they've ever attended that was something that I did that was outside of uh, work, like that was outside the family business. But I had that moment today where I thought about that, and I was like, wow, I can't believe my mom showed up to that. And I guess it's not that big of a deal, but it was for me. Anyway, my parents, yeah, never played with me, and so um, I was alone a lot. I was alone a lot, skateboarding and just getting in trouble. In high school, I started stealing car stereos. You remember in the '90s when car stereos were a thing, and Kenwoods, what was the Pioneers, and these where you could actually they were called pullouts, and you could pull them out of the car, and you pull them out of the car because they were like expensive, so you don't want to leave the. So me and my older friends who were thugs, we would take. I don't know if you know this, but we would take spark plug white. The white around the spark plug supposedly is one of the most dense, or I don't know what the word is. It's a very unique substance that's like one of the denser, hardest things in the world, next to like diamonds or something. I don't know, but if you take spark plug white, this shit's magical, and you throw it at a window, at a car window, it instantly spider glasses the window, and that's what we did to break into cars and steal car stereos in the '90s. All right, I might have birdwalked a little too far, but Burbank, selling egg rolls, saving up money, and as my mom was telling me this, and then of course from here on, I remember everything because now I'm like 13. I was I was actually watching her talk about this, and I shut up because my mom never talks about things. So my mom, when she's with me, she's a mom, meaning I'm 51 years old, and she'll say, "Hey, don't forget to." She'll say, "Don't forget to wear your seatbelt." She'll say, "Don't forget. Can you make sure the windows are not rolled down? There's a lot of danger today, very dangerous." She'll say, "Don't forget the to-go food. It's in the back. It's in the back seat." So she just nags the shit out of me, and that's and I'm always going to be her son. Doesn't matter how old I am. I'm always going to be her baby, right? Um, so when she actually starts talking about her or her life, I just shut up and listen because it's so rare. And so we're in the car, and she didn't get out of the car. I pulled up. I was going to drop her off. She didn't get out of the car. Instead, she just started talking. And so I'm listening to her, and she's basically talking about her entire story. So then she tells me, bought this little hamburger stand for 30 grand. It actually did well. I'm so lucky. And she ran there for 10 years, by the way. An hour drive from Rolling Heights. I remember this. From Rolling Heights to Burbank is about an hour drive, another hour drive on the way home. So that's a 2 hour drive in a little Oldsmobile. 10 years she did this. I was there. And what was really cool though as a kid is I would call her and say, hey, can you bring me home, 2 cheeseburgers, an egg roll, order of onion rings? I mean, fuck, who could do that at age 10, 12, 11? None of my friends had those opportunities, right? So as far as like food, I was set up. But then we sold that, and she heard that the dream in America was to own a McDonald's. If you can own a McDonald's, she heard that would give our family generational wealth. So she applied to try to buy a McDonald's, and they weren't taking applications. I don't think she qualified. I don't know, but she got rejected. So then she was like, "I want to buy a Kentucky Fried Chicken." So then we tried to buy a Kentucky Fried Chicken because they had save up some money, and rejected, denied, and so they ended up buying a Pioneer Chicken. And I was like, Mom, that shit was going down. That shit was going down when we bought it. And she's like, No, they were actually good. I was like, No, I remember. I remember O.J. Simpson was like the person that was like the spokesman for anyway. And so we bought a franchise that was on its way down. I'm sure we got ripped off. Put our savings into it, and it was in Long Beach. So now she's driving because now we'd moved from Rolling Heights to Glendale. Now she's driving from Glendale to Long Beach, and not an Oldsmobile, but in a Cadillac. I remember this fucking gold Cadillac she had. She you couldn't even see her head over the window. Uh, she would have to sit on phone books, and from the back, it looked like the car was driving itself because my mom was so tiny. And she drove this. It was a Cadillac DeVille, giant fucking boat. Because as a old school Korean, that's success. Come to America, drive a Cadillac, right? Sizzler, Cadillac, right? These symbolism. That means she made it, and so she had this Cadillac, and we bought this Pioneer Chicken, and I fucking hated it because now I was like a ninth grader, 10th grader, and if you're Korean, you live at home and you work for your family business, right? Whatever that is. And they bought a fucking Pioneer Chicken in Long Beach. So on the weekends, I had to drive from Glendale to Long Beach and work at the Pioneer Chicken. I mean, the good news was it was so far away from like my high school and stuff that I would never see friends. But God, I was so embarrassed. I hated it. I hated it. And and listen, you're a high school kid, and you're not thinking about like what your parents did, right? You're not thinking about what it takes for you to wear designer jeans and have a school lunch. You just, and so I did that. And then my brother was kind of forced to pull cable, do manual labor with my dad at his work. The Pioneer Chicken was going down, and then the Popeyes bought Pioneer. So then when I was in high school, we had a Popeyes chicken in Long Beach, and I remember during the riots, the LA riots, I was watching this shit on the news. They were showing the area where our store was, right? Because our store was kind of like in that industrial kind of like low income area, and they were rioting, and they burned everything down but that Popeyes, but our store. Everything around the thing was just fucking burned down, looted everything. But they're like, we can't fuck with that Popeyes because it fed the neighborhood. They didn't want to lose the Popeyes chicken anyway. So our Popeyes chicken saved got didn't get demolished during the riots. We sold that, thank God. And my brother found my mom. By the way, my mom's telling me this, and I'm just watching her because I know all this. I was there. My we sold the Popeyes, and then my brother found because he was trying to be a business broker or something, and he was looking at listings and shit, and he found this cool restaurant bar called the Hollywood Canteen in Hollywood. And this is before Hollywood, before things came east, before Hollywood and Highland. This is when Hollywood was an armpit. It was when it was like, hookers and drugs and just like it was no one came to Hollywood. It was only for post production movies. But there was this cool little place called the Hollywood Canteen on Seward Street, and it was in post production in the area, opened by Richard Branson supposedly. So it was this little clubhouse. It had an Airstream in the back, and the whole place looked like the 40s. It was based off a movie called Hollywood Canteen with starring Betty Davis. And so it was all like Art Deco, cool, like New York Mafia looking, and just like it looked amazing. It looked like you'd walk into a movie set. The details were just amazing. And so this little Korean family, us, we buy this thing from the because Richard Branson sold it to, I think, his chef, and then his chef was running it for a while, and the lunches were busy, but the nights were dead, and we bought it. And now I'm looking back, it's like, what the fuck? How did we buy this little cool Italian restaurant? We don't know anything about cooking or anything, so we bought this thing, and the lunches were great. I would work there every day. Very different than Popeye's Chicken, which I was embarrassed of. This one catered to all the celebrities that came in for lunch, who was working on post production. Like when all the big movies came down that street, so they either went to us or they had Del Taco. This is before any of that area was developed, right? And so, I basically sat every celebrity in LA, but the nights were dead because no one came to Hollywood at night. I meet this club promoter. I don't know how oh shit. Okay, this is getting long. 27 minutes in. I don't know if you want to hear this whole story. It is my entire fucking story. So I met this club promoter because the internet, kind of embarrassing to even tell this part of my story. The internet had just been invented and the webcam had just been invented. And I had this idea of a show called Model in the Bottle, where we would rent rent a fancy apartment, and the person I was dating at the time, she was a model. She was all our friends were models, and I thought that business was kind of fascinating and interesting. Obviously, very commercial, and so I was like, what if we put these webcams in this apartment, and we could follow the lives of these models, right? This is before Tyra Banks, America's Top Model, and so I got an investor, and he put down $100K. We're just a bunch of 20-year-old idiots. We rent the penthouse on Doheny on the west side, which was, it was at that time the rent was $10K a month. So can you imagine what that is now? It wrapped around in the sky, the penthouse, and you saw all of Los Angeles. It was, it looked like, so like somewhere a billionaire would live, right? So we rent this thing. We're paying 10 grand a month, and we have like 6 or 7 models living there for free. In exchange, we get to follow them around castings, cameras, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I didn't realize that they would never be home. And so when you logged in to modelinthebottle.com, all you saw was an empty penthouse, right? And this wasn't going to be some shady. This wasn't an OnlyFans. There was no nudity. It was more of like a live documentary about models. Anyway, through that experience, which failed, the guy that was living in that building, not in the penthouse, he was a club promoter, and he was a soap opera star and actor. Good-looking guy, very popular. The kind of guy who had 5,000 numbers in his back then, his BlackBerry. And anyway, he ends up in my restaurant. He says, I could blow this place up. Give me 3 months, I could blow this place up. And I remember I was like, what do you mean? And at the time, we're kind of desperate. Business wasn't good. And at the same time, like if I did this, I'd be gambling my family's life savings. But I was like, I convinced my parents, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's take a risk. My mom was very safe. My one thing I admire about my dad was he was a risk taker. That's something that I've always learned from my dad. My dad's no longer with us, but he came to America and he always took risks. He always doubled down on shit. He always. My mom was more conservative, so my dad was like, "Let's do it. Fuck it, let's do it." And my dad didn't know anything. He just based on 20-something-year-old son's passion and my belief in this stranger. My dad said, "Okay, let's do it." Suddenly, cut to they're bringing in grass to put on the inside a shark tank. There's a whole story of us buying a $600 shark. God, PETA would have just closed us down. We bought a shark. I think it was illegal. We bought a shark in the warehouse, I think in Long Beach. And the guy that sold us the shark said, "Where are you driving this to?" So we're driving to Hollywood. It was in a van. And he says, "Man, the shark's probably going to die." And we're like, "No, we can't let the shark die." He's like, "If you're gonna, the shark's gonna die, and like really fast. You got to get it in the tank." And we're ripping on the 405 from Long Beach to Hollywood in this van with a real shark. The shark was like the size of my leg, um, in this giant container, scared that it was gonna die. We get the shark in the shark tank at the restaurant, and it's gorgeous. It's not like a little fish that looks like a shark. It's a real sand shark, right? It's the sharks that what the drummer from Molly Crew, he's got a bunch of them in his mansion. Anyway, so we have a shark tank now, and we have hookah pipes, and we have all like it's amazing. And 3 months later, the fucking place blows up, and everyone's there. There's 400 people outside. It's one of those things where we had a door guy, 400 people outside, and inside uh, it was models, millionaires, celebrities, right? Like you couldn't get in. And I remember, and it was interesting because it was a very Hollywood story where it's like nothing, and then overnight it's this big thing. And the club promoter and I, we made a deal that he would front it. It's called fronting. So he would pretend like he owned the club, and I was just in the back washing the dishes and shit. I had no idea what I was doing. Everyone was stealing from us. My dad gets caught up in this because he sees money, and he's like, "Fucking dad shady." He says, "Hey," because I mean, we would have trash bags of cash. Everything was done in cash then, right? Registers, bartenders. We're still selling bottles of Cristal, and it was like the height of hip hop, 2001, and everyone from like Leo to this is when I hung out with Matt Damon one night. I mean, it was crazy. Vice was on us. People were dropping roofies. I mean, there was fights and bear spray, and it was just madness. I would be there till like two in the morning, and then we'd go from there to like Cantors. We're just lived like vampires. But my dad said, take the take the well vodka or the well alcohol that's $3 a bottle, and let's pour that into the expensive bottles, the Belvedere and all that. They're not gonna know. Oh my god, we're just doing some shady shit without permits. Anyway, it all climaxes to um, P Diddy came in, wanted to open till 4 because he's on New York time. Vice was already on us. There was already shady stuff happening. I I was trying to be cool, and I said, okay, let's open till 4, and then that's not legal. Vice shuts us down. The whole place gets shut down. And I remember this moment where I was like, I just lost my family's money. It's not like we were rich, and I mean, I just told you our whole story. My mom coming here and this kind of flashed in front of my eyes as we were getting shut down. My mom coming here parents coming here working at a 7-Eleven for 16 hours, because they came here alone, left their kids in Korea because they couldn't afford to have kids here. They want to come here for a year, just save, to the little hamburger shack selling egg rolls, to the Pioneer Chicken, which then became a Popeyes, and building all up into this. And because I wanted to take this risk, because I wanted to turn cool into commodity, I lost all their money. Right? It was that moment in a movie where I've lost everything now. Luckily, went to court and convinced the judge to uh, not shut us down. Um, did the whole story that I'm telling you now about coming to America. Judge doesn't shut us down. We're able to sell the restaurant bar, get out of the business. I get married. I try to make it as a screenwriter for the next 10 years. By the way, HBO hears about the story about the club, buys my life rights, hires me to write the screenplay, almost gets turned into a movie. Movie falls apart, and that's when I kind of hit the rock bottom. Marriage was falling apart, and I said, okay, I'm done with this. I need to go get a real career. And that's when, at 35, got a divorce, went back to school, became a therapist. Started my life all over, got on Tumblr, made a blog, called it The Angry Therapist, and I started blogging. Anyway, that was 20 years ago, and today I sit here in my living room, in my little nook confessional, sharing this story, taking the baton from my mom, who started this story today, me finishing it here, and I feel so much gratitude. And I gotta say, the thing about stories, and this is something that I really believe in, and if there's anything that I would love for you to take from me, um, it's this, and it's that, when you're going through shit, um, all you see is what's in front of you, and there's panic, and you can't see anything further, right? You may have hope, you can pray. There's no proof that things are going to work out. And I feel like, if you know that your story is the most valuable thing that you will ever own, and if you get to a point in your life where um, you not only accept your story, but you start to share it. That's what I did on Tumblr 20 years ago. I did it via blog, but I started to share my story, and I didn't know that was going to turn into books and podcasting and it's all this shit. I didn't know anyone would read it. I created a blog because I couldn't afford therapy, you know? And so, um, if you start to share your story, there's a tipping point where your story becomes bigger than you. And then it becomes its own living, breathing thing. It's like, if you have enough strength and courage to run with a kite, there's a point where the kite is in the sky on its own, and all you have to do is just kind of hold on to the string, right? And I feel like, um, most of us, I mean, we all have a story, but the people that are sharing their stories, um, you're impacting people, and your story is not bigger than you. And I think that we have a responsibility to share our stories, to not keep them secret, to not rip out chapters. I think it's our contribution to the collective, because you don't know who's going to hear your story and what the impact of that's going to be, or who's going to hear a piece of your story, or the thing that you went through, or when you stood up, or what you've learned. I mean, it's been like this, I think, since the beginning of time, when we're drawing in caves. And as far as, technology is going to take us, I don't think this is ever going to change. I mean, it's the human experience is accepting your story sharing your story and your story becoming bigger than you. Now, one of the things that has helped me, especially when things are bad, is that I know there's a story there. You know, there's turning points, there's act breaks, there's chapters. And if you can pull back, and I know it's hard when you're in the trenches, and know that what's happening is you're creating a story and that your story is going to help people. Well, I don't know about you, but that gives me 92 octane. It gets me out of my head and my problems, and then now you're living in service. And I think that is, it's one of the highest frequencies to live on. And I think that's when good shit happens. That's when stars line up, that's when doors open. Um, anyway, that's what I would like for people to take away from me and my story. Thank you for listening. Be well.